Hello everyone, my name is Cheryl and I am the environmental biologist at the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee. Today we will be talking about how we can assess water quality by looking at aquatic bugs. Join us as we search for bugs and learn what they mean for the health of Junction Creek. So just to give a little bit of background about us, the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee is an organization based in Sudbury with the goal to restore Junction Creek to a healthy and revitalized ecosystem for future generations. Our mission is to lead the way for improving and maintaining a healthy Junction Creek watershed by conducting research and monitoring programs to assess the health of the creek, providing educational opportunities to share knowledge and promote the work being done, organizing restoration activities to recover and protect the watershed and the creek, as well as connect the community with Junction Creek to empower long-term environmental stewardship. On this map, this yellow area you see here is the Junction Creek watershed. A watershed is an area of land where all the rain and snow it receives will collect in a body of water. In this case, all the water that we use that falls in the greater city of Sudbury eventually flows into Junction Creek. And Junction Creek starts up in Garson, flows through New Sudbury, under the downtown core, south to Kelly Lake, and eventually all the water flows into Lake Huron, which is not pictured on this map. So why is monitoring water quality important? Well, by understanding what the condition of our water is, it can help us make sound decisions on how we use our water. It can be used to alert us to potential current, ongoing, or emerging problems in our water. It can be used to assess drinking water standards, and it can help lawmakers and other stakeholders understand how effective current water policies are, and if needed, update or create new policies to better protect human health and the environment. The Junction Creek Stewardship Committee monitors water quality by looking at three things: its physical properties, its chemical makeup, and biological indicators. Some physical parameters we look at are things like the temperature of the water, turbidity or how clear it is, and how much oxygen is in the water that allows for things to live in it. Some chemical parameters we look at are salinity, or how much salt is in the water, nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, and even pollutants such as metals. The biological or living things we look at to determine water quality are fish, how many are in the creek and how healthy they are, and the one we will focus on for the rest of this presentation, benthic macroinvertebrates. So what are benthic macroinvertebrates? It is a big term, and if you need help pronouncing it, you can say it as benthic macroinvertebrates. So let's break down this term. Benthic means bottom dwelling. In this case, we are referring to the bottom of a body of water, whether it be a lake, wetland, or creek. Macro means large enough to see with the naked eye. Invertebrates. These are animals that do not have a backbone. Humans are not invertebrates because we have backbones or spines. Some common invertebrates you might be more familiar with are sea stars, earthworms, or even octopuses. Altogether, the term benthic macroinvertebrate refers to small aquatic animals with no backbone, can be generally seen without any aid, and are found in and around bodies of water. Moving forward, I will refer to them as benthics or bugs for the rest of this presentation. So how does the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee collect benthics? Let's follow some members of our team to see what the process of sampling, picking, and identifying benthics is. One method we use is called the traveling kick and sweep. How it works is there are two people in the creek wearing chest waders so they don't get wet. One person kicks up the bottom of the creek as they move across, while another person stands downstream from them, collecting everything that gets stirred up into a net while using a sweeping motion. This is to make sure the benthics don't swim out of the net. By the end of it, the net will be filled with a lot of mud, rocks, sticks, and hopefully bugs. After kicking and sweeping, we transfer the sample from the net into a bucket. Here you can see Tammy emptying everything that's in the net into a clean, empty bucket and rinsing the sides of the net. This is to make sure that we get the benthics that might still be clinging onto the net into the bucket. Once all the contents are in the bucket, we can carry it to another area nearby for further processing. Once we find an area to process the sample, we divide up the contents of the bucket into trays so that everyone can look through it. This makes it easier for staff to look for benthics and look through the sample as thoroughly as possible. Here you can see our staff set up a small station on a bench near where they sampled and are looking through portions of what they collected in trays. The photo on the right is a tray with some of the stuff that was in the bucket. At first glance, it looks like a bunch of sticks, leaves, and other organic debris. But when you look close, you can usually see some movement in the tray. Sometimes you can see larger benthics right away, such as this one here. Can you take a guess as to what it might be? Hint: it looks like a tiny lobster. If you guessed crayfish, you're correct. Once the sample is divided up into trays, we look for benthics and use small tools like tweezers and pipettes to pick them out. Here you can see Leanne searching through her tray. When she finds a benthic, she uses her suction tool to pick it up and move it to a small clear dish that has no other creek debris in it. This is so she can see it clearly and identify it correctly. She'll put all the benthics she can find in this tray into this dish. Once all the benthics have been picked out from the tray and are in this clear dish, we look at them individually and identify them using our sight or with the help of a magnifying glass to see them better. The photo on the right is the sheet we use to identify the benthics and keep track of how many we find. With each creek sample, we usually aim to count 100 bugs. So what can we see in this dish? And what does it tell us about the section of the creek our staff sampled in? Let's look at it together. One benthic we found was an aquatic riffle beetle. This beetle is an adult because it has a fully developed body that is hard. They are mostly found in habitats with fast flowing water and high oxygen levels, which is a sign of good water quality. Another is a midge larva. Midges can be found in almost every aquatic habitat and are able to live in clean and polluted waters. The larvae, or the babies, live in the water before they swim to the surface and emerge as fully fledged flying adults. In our dish, we also found some black fly larvae. Generally, black flies are able to tolerate pollution in aquatic habitats. You may have encountered black fly adults when being outside, as they often bite and leave very itchy marks. Another benthic we can see here is a caddisfly larva. This kind in particular spins nets, almost like spiders, that catch tiny bits of organic debris like algae or even smaller benthics for food. This benthic has a varying tolerance to pollution in water. There's something similar to the caddisfly larva in this dish, and that is this case-making caddisfly. This type of caddisfly builds a small case that it lives in, almost like a snail. But the case can be made out of sticks, leaves, or even small rocks, as you can see here. Finding large amounts of these caddisflies in the sample tell us that the water could be good quality with little pollution, since that's what they prefer to live in. These are just a few benthics we found in our sample. Overall, our staff found a lot of different benthics and were able to reach their 100 count. So we know that we can see benthics using our own eyes, but sometimes it can be difficult to identify them when they can be so tiny. In this case, we can put the benthics under this piece of equipment called a microscope in order to see the bugs with full detail. Here, you can see these close-up and detailed photos of a crane fly larva, a mayfly larva, and a net spinner caddisfly under a microscope. Biologists often use microscopes to identify benthics, to figure out what species they are, and to see all their features up close. This is the kind of view you don't get by just looking at them in trays. Based on the benthics we found and how many of them we found, we can conclude that the water quality and habitat in this section of the creek is good. There's lots of green vegetation, there's fast-flowing water that supports high oxygen levels for the benthics, and it is undisturbed with very little litter or pollution in the water. However, we must remember that looking at benthics is only one way to determine water quality. The physical and the chemical factors that we mentioned before should be included together with the biological sampling to fully conclude what the water quality is, not just for one section of the creek, but for all of it. Let's talk about threats to Junction Creek's water quality. One of the biggest threats is the presence of pollution and trash in and around the creek. This impacts the water quality by leaching waste and residue chemicals into the water and prevents the growth of aquatic plants and habitat necessary for fish and benthics to live in. Imagine if your home was filled with other people's garbage. Would you want to live there? Another threat is stormwater runoff. So when rain or snow hits a surface, it becomes stormwater. Stormwater picks up and transports many of the pollutants it encounters, which are not treated before draining directly into rivers, streams, and lakes that hold our drinking water. These pollutants include sediment, pet waste, pesticides, fertilizers, automobile fluids such as oil, gasoline, or antifreeze, litter, and more. When it hits hard surfaces like pavement, sidewalks, and roofs, it creates stormwater runoff. By carrying all these different kinds of pollution into our waterways, stormwater runoff itself becomes a pollutant and a threat to water quality. Here are some things that you and your family can do to promote a healthier creek. You can plant a buffer of native plants close to the shore. Use phosphate-free soaps, detergents, and cleaners to avoid nutrient buildup in the creek. Leave fallen trees and branches in the shallows of the creek to promote habitat for aquatic species. If you're building, build at least 12 meters away from the shore. Clean up pet waste. Avoid using fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides near water. Use salt alternatives to remove ice in winter. Upkeep your vehicles and repair any leaks. Properly dispose of your garbage, recycling, or compost in their proper bins. And last but not least, Share your waterfront wisdom with neighbors and friends. Remember, the amount of pollution that you stop may seem small, but together it all adds up to clearer water for everyone to enjoy. The biggest thing you could do for Junction Creek is reduce your consumption of disposable materials and not litter in the creek. This step-by-step guide to reducing your waste consumption is a great starting point. Rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, refurbish, repair, repurpose, and recycle your materials. You can also participate in future cleanup events held by the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee and spread the word about protecting the creek by keeping litter out and away from it. I'll summarize everything with this quote by Sydney Smith. It is the greatest of all mistakes to do nothing because you can only do so little. Do what you can. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. Here is the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee's contact information if you would like to reach out with any questions, as well as our social media handle and platforms. This presentation is a part of our Urban Stream Health and Citizen Stewardship Project in partnership with Nickel District Conservation Foundation, supported by the RBC Foundation. Together, we can work to improve Junction Creek's water quality and maintain it for years to come. On behalf of the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee, we hope you learned something new today, and thank you for joining us.